I want to talk to you about your proposal on the pension, but first I'd like to ask one question, Lisa, about this breaking news here. And we're in New York, you're in Washington, you've been busy doing the nation's business. But in the meantime, Amazon has announced about a half an hour ago that they're going to pull out of plans to build a second headquarters right here in New York over on Long Island City. And it's because of resistance from the state and local political authorities, despite the people being in favor of it. Now, Indianapolis was in the top 20 in the finals. If Amazon were willing to open this back up, they've indicated they won't, but if they would Indianapolis still like them to come out there?
We'd love to have them there. Only in a place like New York, or maybe I could throw California in there with it, would they shun or turn away somebody like Amazon wanting to come there and do business. I think they will down the road with that kind of approach to business in general find themselves in a tough spot. Folks are moving out of places like that, Illinois, California, New York, for that very reason. I don't see how they possibly can justify doing something like that when they're trying to call themselves business friendly. So I know they've been trying to change their image. This might set them back.
Okay, Senator, let's go back to this proposal you have, this bill about redoing the pension plan, really sort of eliminating, actually. We'll put up on the screen for our audience where it is now, where basically if you're there for 5 years, you get to 62, you get the pension. Actually, some people get it all the way down to 50 years old. There are about 611 former members of Congress now receiving pensions. You have a proposal that essentially would say you can participate in the equivalent of a 401k. You can make contributions into that the way a lot of Americans do, and that their retirement savings will really exist in that plan. Give us a sense of why you want to do that.
So I ran for Senate because of frustration with that kind of thing and really business as usual and poor results. And Senator Scott and I think you've got two of us that aren't going to just take all this stuff, as business as usual. I get there, and philosophically, and I just didn't want to participate in the pension plan. They said, well, there's never been a senator other than a few that ever mentioned it. I said, well, check it out. I do not want to participate. I need the health care and to resign as CEO of my company and give up the health insurance. And I wanted to do the 401k like all other Americans do. Can't do it. So I've got a narrow bill that'll try to let you opt out of it. But this bill says, especially with the results that have been delivered over the last couple decades, congressmen, senators, they do not deserve a pension, mostly because nobody else has them. They're hard to fund. Most of them out there, whether they're public or private, are underfunded. And the number of people on pensions, very, very small. Why should senators, why should congresspeople have them? That's the whole point of it. Nancy Pelosi, for instance, 33 years. She quits tomorrow, she gets around $100,000. Most people would be appalled at that, the amount of it, and the fact that they still have them.
So, Senator, I applaud the sentiment behind this. At the same time, I'm sure you've done the numbers. We went and we found from the Congressional Research Service, and we sort of did all the math right now about the total number of people who are getting pensions. And it's about $28 million a year, which is nothing to sneeze at. But given the size of the budget, it's not going to make a material difference. What are you trying to point toward? Because this can't be the end of it. If you're really going to try to address fiscal issues in the country, it's got to go way beyond that $28 million.
No, the numbers of it is the symbolism of it, and the fact that stuff like that, when it comes to any perk, any pay advantage, the framers never intended it that way. And a pension, since it is just really something that no one else really has anymore, and the ones that are out there are chronically underfunded, why should the people that run this government, if they were knocking it out of the park with results, it might be an argument that they deserve it. But that's quite the contrary. I think if you start there, I'm a believer in term limits. I'm a believer that there should be accountability. I have a no budget, no pay bill that Senator Scott's on with me. Ridiculous that you've got a year to get a budget done, and we haven't done it in years. So a lot of stuff needs to change here if we ever want to start reducing the deficit, not accumulating more. We just hit $22 trillion in debt, by the way, in the last day or so. That's abysmal performance.
Well, exactly. The debt number, apart from the deficit, the debt number is really alarming, I think, to a lot of Americans. And therefore, I wonder, as I look at the sentiment behind your bill, is this pointing in the direction of privatizing Social Security? Because that is one of the really big unfunded contingent liabilities sitting out there.
Well, that's a hot button issue, whether you privatize it or not. The fact that actuarially we know that Social Security is going to start going south, here in a little over 10 years. Medicare happens here in 2023. And a $22 trillion debt, trillion-dollar deficits, those programs are never going to get fixed when you're running your general house in such disorder, let alone things like infrastructure that we all know. States like Indiana have already, tackled that issue. But the federal government is a bad example as the biggest business in the world, where you spend $4.3 trillion and you take in $3.3 trillion, and you're willing to pile all this onto your kids and grandkids with debt. Something's got to change, or it will end up in a series of small calamities or a big one that'll make 2008 look like a walk in the park.